You know, you have this more pessimistic expectation outlook from the consumer. Then you have rising COVID cases, and you have targeted regional shutdowns in the U.S. What does that mean for your business?
Well, what's going on, you can see, is that there's clearly an impact on consumer spending. Obviously, nobody's traveling the way they used to. Nobody's going to the theater. Nobody's out in public entertainment events. You know, we've been managing our company through 4 stages, as we've said. And the first one was containment. That is kind of the March-April period when everything began to shut down. And the second one was stabilization, kind of near the bottom of the shutdown. And then normalization, which is a big word for better than stabilization, but not really normal, our new normal. We're all kind of living through some stages of that. It goes back and forth depending on looming shutdowns, increase in cases and the like. And then finally, when you get back with vaccines and travel and the like, maybe sometime towards the second half of next year, we would be looking at getting back to a pre-COVID phase. That's what we're seeing. So consumer spending domestically, Alex, is in pretty good shape. I mean, most countries have been growing on consumer spending domestically. Now, the second wave that's passing through Europe and the US will probably crimp some of that. But travel is certainly challenged. And in our case, we get 2 other tailwinds. One is that everything's going digital. So, you know, people who were using cash earlier are now using some form of a contactless card or e-commerce online, all of which helps run through our rails. And the second part is that our data analytics, cybersecurity businesses, these are doing very well in the environment where everybody is going digital. So it's kind of a mixed bag over there.
Ajay, plenty to unpack within that, so let's kind of segment it a little bit. Let's talk first of all about what is happening with travel. You talk about the weakness that we are seeing with travel. I talked to a number of CEOs and asked them the question, how much are they traveling? And they say a lot less. I talked to the Swiss Re CEO this week, and he told me his budget next year is going to be down by 30%. He thinks it's probably going to be more than that in terms of what they ultimately come into. What do you think, when does travel come back? When does business travel come back? And how different do you think business travel will be when it comes back?
Yeah, so I think personal travel will come back before business travel. If you look at the trends out of countries like China and Japan, where there is a greater degree of normalization in their environment than we have today here in the US or in Europe, it looks like personal travel will come back quicker than business travel. I do believe that travel per se requires not just a vaccine that's out there sometime, but it also requires the degree of testing and cross-border possibilities by corridors maybe for travel. So you can see Singapore is experimenting with corridors with countries, as is China, as is Japan, and Australia is beginning to talk about it. So I think travel will begin, this is cross-border I'm talking about, not domestic. Domestic travel already has commenced. I mean, look at the US. The TSA is clearing more than 1 million passengers a day. At the bottom of the crisis, in that stabilization phase, they were down to 100,000. Pre-COVID, it was 3 million. So we're not back to where we used to be. But domestic travel is up there. This is really cross-border that I'm referring to when I talk about the trends.
One thing that we're seeing that's different this time around is, at least in the U.S., the lack of stimulus. I mean, part of the reason why consumer spending and people's bank accounts held up so well was because governments were just cutting checks in the spring. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. It may be a different story over in Europe. So I wanted to get your perspective on sort of the urgency. Like, when is the drop-dead date for when your customers are like, I can't pay my bill anymore?
Well, so look, I don't actually see payback because I'm not an issuing institution. Banks do the issuing. We're the rail on which all these payment flows work. So I'm not the best one to give you the perspective of an exact date. But I can tell you that when the stimulus checks were flowing into fiscal stimulus, into the United States consumer or other consumers overseas, you could see bank accounts beginning to grow in size, and you could see spending in the kind of stores that even people who were lower in the income strata, the stores they would go to, you could see them benefiting. I can certainly see a slowdown on some of that as the stimulus checks have dried up here in the US and elsewhere. So clearly, we do need to think again about when and how to provide that fiscal stimulus. I don't think it's monetary stimulus, Alex, that we need. There's enough liquidity in the markets. The central banks and finance ministers around the world learned really well from the last crisis. I think they stepped in very early and very well to keep the markets fluid and flowing. It's really fiscal stimulus that we need, checks in people's pockets, for small businesses even more than others. You know that the impact on small businesses, minorities, and women of the last 6 months is disproportionate to that of others.
What would you do if you were part of this administration? What would you do if you were at the Treasury in terms of making sure that the US government delivers what the US economy needs? There have been rumors, Ajay, that you are interested in serving. Is that true? And what would you do if you were there?
I mean, the rumors are wrong, so let's get that out of the way. I'm here at Mastercard. I'm going to become the exec chair on the 1st of January, and I have no intention of going anywhere from this role. But back to your bigger question, the question about what we could be doing in the US. Like I said, I think fiscal stimulus is really important. Monetary stimulus, we're in great shape. We just need to make sure that we can get the right kind of stimulus for small businesses. I think the PPP program, while people can say it wasn't executed perfectly in the heat of the moment, remember, it did a great job. And I think we need to think about how to keep the inputs coming for small businesses. If you're a zipline operator in Hawaii with 7 employees, there's nothing wrong with your business. You probably run a great business with terrific employees. There's just no flow of tourism coming in. So we've got to help you tide over this period with your employees and your rent so you can come out the next few months. If you believe that the vaccine will be widely available sometime in the second half of next year, we need to find a way to tide over these next 6-8 months in a constructive way for small businesses and minorities and women-owned businesses as well.
All right, definitely squashing that administration position there. So let me get your take then on what you think is going to happen to financial regulation, maybe more M&A scrutiny. The fear and the narrative in the market is that that's going to come under a much brighter spotlight under a President-elect Biden. What does that mean for MasterCard that's trying to expand into business-to-business payments and trying to grow their business into different areas?
But you've got to remember that our business has changed a great deal over this past decade. While earlier we were principally in the business of enabling payments for credit cards, we've gone way beyond that. Today, we've got about 1/3 of our revenue coming from data, from analytics, from cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, those spaces. We have another big chunk coming from multi-rail payments. We are the only true player who connects into instant payment rails. We just announced yesterday that we won the contract for Payments Canada to do their clearing and settlement on their rails. We do VocaLink in the UK. We are in P27 in the Nordics, in Saudi, and parts of Southeast Asia and Latin America. So I think we get a lot of revenue from that. And we do get a substantial amount of revenue out of commercial payments and prepaid cards and debit cards. So we have card in our name, but that doesn't make the company. We're only interested actually in the account and the flows through that. So my general opinion about regulation is regulation done right is actually to create a level playing field and transparency for all players to come and win. I am happy with that kind of regulation. And in fact, I would want to constructively participate in dialogues around that topic. And I want to embrace that in many ways. What worries me is if the regulation creates unequal playing fields, benefits one over the other. I don't believe government should be choosing winners or losers in business. You can certainly look after citizens, but businesses should be allowed to compete. In the same way, I believe that regulation that creates protectionism is a bad idea. But other than that, I think regulation creates guide rails and creates level playing fields for businesses to run and win, and may the best one win.
Digital is going to be an area that regulation is going to take a very, very keen look at. I genuinely can't remember, Ajay, the last time I used money, real money, pounds and pence. Right. That's the world we now live in. Let's talk a bit about digital currencies. Jay Powell, Andrew Bailey over at the Bank of England, and Christine Lagarde were on a panel yesterday, and they were talking about digital currencies. And Christine Lagarde sounded really quite kind of on the front foot when she was talking about kind of where we go next with digital currency. In fact, she said this: if it's cheaper, faster, more secure for users, then we should explore it. If it's going to contribute to better monetary sovereignty, a better autonomy for the euro area, I think we should explore it. Ajay, how far away do you think we are from digital currencies in the US and in Europe, and what impact would they have on your business?
So I think digital currency spans a lot of space. And so what you're now discussing is central bank digital currencies, fiat currencies, which are converted into digital, which is what Christine's referring to, which is what the Chinese government recently launched, and a number of countries around the world, Sweden, Canada, Singapore, the UK, have looked and thought about this at various levels, as is the US Federal Reserve. I'm actually a believer in the fact that if we are going to go to digital currencies for all the right reasons, then we should be going there because they're central bank supported fiat currencies. I am less confident about currencies that are not done so, because I believe that a currency is a social contract between a government and its citizens, and it needs a lot of careful management in that process. Now, having said that, stable coins are much better than cryptocurrencies per se, because stable coins take away the volatility angle. They don't solve for all the other topics, but I'm a fan of central bank digital currencies. Mastercard's been investing in this space for a while. My general view is that whether we clear, settle, and authorize 200 different currencies in the world, or we clear, settle, and authorize 200 different digital currencies, these people still need to connect into the systems of acceptance and clearing and authorizing. And we believe we can provide that. We are among the largest owners of patents in the space of central bank digital currencies. We've launched a sandbox to enable commercial banks and central banks to innovate together in the space. So it depends where the CBDCs go. If they go in the form where it's only wholesale settlement between banks, that's a relatively easy one. If it's a form where there's a double tier, meaning the central bank issues a digital currency, commercial banks play a role, we need to find a way to connect into consumers and businesses. That's one kind of CBDC. If it's one where the central bank goes directly to the consumer, that's a whole different game with a whole different risk profile of what the central bank is exposed to. Economy. And I don't think that's the one that Christine and others are referring to. They're referring to that double tier one in the middle or the wholesale one. And I'm a fan of those. I'm a believer that those will come and we should participate in them.